The last quiet evening. The house had never felt this silent before. Lena Brookfield stood at the edge of the living room, her fingers wrapped around the strap of her small travel bag. The old wooden floor creaked softly beneath her shoes, as if the house itself was sighing under the weight of memories. Outside, the evening sky over Portsmouth was turning the color of fading lavender. A slow autumn wind brushed against the windows, carrying the scent of salt from the distant harbor. This house had always been alive. Her grandmother's laughter used to echo through these rooms, the clinking of teacups, the soft humming of old songs while she cooked. Now there was only silence. Lena exhaled slowly. "Just one night," she whispered to herself. "Tomorrow I'll leave." Boston University waited for her in a few days. A new city, new classes, new life. It was supposed to feel exciting. Instead, everything felt strangely heavy. A month ago, her life had cracked open in two quiet ways. First, the breakup. 4 years with Daniel, and it had ended with a simple sentence. "I think we want different futures." No fight, no drama, just an empty kind of ending that left her questioning everything. And then her grandmother, Margaret Whitmore, the strongest person Lena had ever known. She had passed away 2 weeks ago in this very house, peacefully in her sleep. The doctors called it natural, but Lena still felt as if a piece of the world had quietly disappeared. She walked slowly toward the kitchen. The kettle still sat on the stove where it had always been. The small, round table near the window held the familiar lace cloth her grandmother loved. Lena touched the back of the wooden chair. "I miss you already," she murmured. For a moment, the memory returned so clearly that it almost hurt. Her grandmother sitting here, warm tea in her hands, smiling at Lena like she always knew something the rest of the world didn't. Margaret Whitmore had lived an unusual life. Everyone in town knew that. She had stories from everywhere. Paris, Lisbon, Morocco, New York. But whenever Lena asked about those adventures, her grandmother would simply smile and say, "Some stories are better read than told." At the time, she thought it was just one of her mysterious sayings. Now she wondered if it meant something more. The old grandfather clock in the hallway struck 8. The sound echoed through the empty house. Lena decided she should pack the last few things before leaving tomorrow morning. She walked upstairs. Her grandmother's bedroom door was slightly open. Lena paused. She hadn't gone inside since the funeral. For some reason, the room felt sacred, like stepping into a memory that wasn't ready to be touched. But tonight, something pulled her forward. She gently pushed the door open. The room smelled faintly of lavender and old books. Everything was exactly the same. The neatly folded quilt, the small reading lamp beside the bed, the wooden bookshelf filled with worn travel journals. Lena stepped inside slowly, almost respectfully. Her fingers brushed across the edge of the dresser, and that's when she noticed something unusual. One of the drawers was slightly open. Her grandmother was obsessively organized. Nothing was ever left half open. Curious, Lena slid the drawer out. Inside were old letters tied together with a thin ribbon, photographs, postcards from places all over the world, and beneath them, a thick, leather-bound notebook. Dark brown, worn at the edges, the pages inside looked old, the kind that had been touched thousands of times. Lena's heart skipped slightly. She lifted it carefully. On the first page, written in elegant handwriting, were 3 simple words. Margaret Whitmore, Personal Diary. Below that, a small line. If someone finds this one day, It means the story is ready to be told. A chill ran gently down Lena's spine. She sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. Outside, the wind tapped softly against the window, but for a moment she hesitated. Reading someone's diary felt personal, almost intrusive. But this was her grandmother, and somehow it felt like the old woman had left this behind for her to discover. Lena opened the diary again. Her ink had faded slightly with time, but the words were still clear. June 14th, 1962. I never believed that a single night could change the direction of a life. But tonight, it did. It started in a place called the White Horse Tavern, and it began with a stranger who asked if he could share my table. Lena's breath caught softly. White Horse Tavern? She leaned closer, her curiosity now fully awake. The quiet bedroom seemed to dissolve around her as she turned the page, and somewhere, decades in the past, another story was beginning. A story her grandmother had kept hidden for an entire lifetime. Tea. The night was warm in New York City, and the lights outside the White Horse Tavern glowed like the beginning of something dangerous, or maybe something beautiful. Lena turned the page slowly. The paper felt fragile beneath her fingers, like something that had been waiting decades to be touched again. Outside, the wind brushed softly against the windows, but Lena hardly noticed anymore. Her entire world had narrowed to the faded ink on those yellowing pages. She leaned back against the wooden headboard of her grandmother's bed and continued reading. June 14th, 1962. New York has a strange kind of energy at night. It feels like the city never truly sleeps. Even the air seems alive, filled with music, laughter, arguments, and secrets whispered between strangers. Poets, writers, musicians, and a few people who simply looked lost, like me. Lena smiled faintly. "Sounds familiar," she murmured. She turned the page. I almost left. The place felt too loud, too alive, too confident. But then I saw an empty table near the window. So I sat. I ordered a drink I had never tried before just to feel a little braver, and I told myself I would stay for 10 minutes. Lena could practically see it in her mind. The dim lights, the crowded bar, her grandmother sitting alone by the window, young, nervous, waiting for something she didn't even know yet. The door opened again a few minutes later, and that was when everything changed. Lena leaned forward instinctively. Her heartbeat quickened. He walked in like someone who didn't care whether anyone noticed him, but everyone did. Tall, dark coat, a little messy like he had just stepped out of an adventure. He looked around the tavern as if searching for someone, or maybe searching for somewhere to belong. Lena whispered softly, "That must be him." Her grandfather, the man she had only known through old photographs and quiet family stories. But here, in these pages, he was about to appear for the first time. The tavern was full, so he started walking from table to table. Most people ignored him, some shook their heads, and then he reached my table. Lena held her breath as she read the next line. He looked at the empty chair across from me and asked a simple question. "Mind if I sit?" Lena laughed quietly. "That's it," she said to the empty room, but she could already feel it. Something about this moment mattered. I should have said no. My mother always warned me about talking to strangers, especially charming ones. But something about his eyes made it impossible to refuse. They looked like someone who had already lived 10 different lives. So I nodded. "Sure." "I'm Daniel Carter," he said. "Margaret Whitmore," I replied. And just like that, two strangers shared a table in the middle of a noisy tavern. Neither of us knew that this small moment would one day change everything. Lena froze. "Daniel Carter," she whispered to herself. She had heard that name before, but her grandmother had rarely spoken about him. Her parents almost never mentioned him. For some reason, the story of her grandfather had always been incomplete. Lena suddenly felt a strange excitement. This diary wasn't just a love story. It was revealing a mystery. Downstairs, the old clock struck 9. The sound echoed. Lena looked toward the bedroom door. Dong! She counted slowly. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and finally, 11. The house fell silent again. It was 11 p.m. Lena rubbed her tired eyes and leaned back against the headboard. She hadn't realized how much time had passed while reading. It felt like only a few minutes, but hours had gone by. Her eyes drifted toward the diary again. Part of her wanted to keep reading, to dive deeper into the mystery, to find out what happened after the map disappeared. But another part of her felt something else, something calmer, something thoughtful. Lena reached for her backpack lying on the floor. From the front pocket, she pulled out her small travel notebook, the one she used for photography notes and random thoughts. She opened it. For a moment, the blank page stared back at her. Then she picked up a pen. Slowly, she began writing. June 3rd. Tonight, I opened Grandma's diary. I thought it would just be memories, but it feels like I discovered the beginning of something much bigger. A tavern in New York, a stranger named Daniel Carter, a mysterious map, and something called the Hidden Paths. I don't know where this story is going yet, but for the first time in weeks, I feel curious about life again. Lena paused. She tapped the pen lightly against the paper. Then she added one more line. Maybe some stories don't end. Maybe they just wait for someone new to continue them. She closed the notebook slowly. For a moment, she looked back at her grandmother's diary resting on the bed beside her. The worn leather cover looked older now under the dim light, but it also felt important, like it had been waiting for this exact moment. Lena gently picked it up again. Instead of putting it back in the drawer, she placed it carefully inside her backpack, right next to her camera, right next to her notebook, almost like it belonged there. She stood up and walked toward the window. Outside, the quiet streets of Portsmouth glowed softly under the streetlights. Tomorrow she would leave for Boston, a new city, a new life. But tonight, something had changed. Lena no longer felt like she was just leaving her old life behind. It felt like she was stepping into the beginning of a story that had started in 1962 inside the White Horse Tavern, and somehow that story had found its way to her. She closed the window gently and turned off the lamp. The room fell into darkness, but the adventure had already begun. End of chapter 1.